Right now, though, we have a man who is one of the most engaging figures in NASCAR, a man who will always be remembered for that day 10 years ago when he won the Daytona 500, broke a horrendous slump on the same day that one of his best friends, Dale Earnhardt, died. While trying to help this man to victory, he is Michael+Waltrip, who has a new book out about the bittersweet day 10 years ago. It's called In the Blink of an Eye, Dale, Daytona, and the Day That Changed Everything. Michael, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Michael, why did you finally decide to write this book about one of the most memorable and horrid moments in NASCAR history?
Well, it's just, it's been 10 years, and I really have chosen since that day not to talk a whole lot about it, and less as time has gone forward. And I was telling my buddy that I'd have to write a book to explain exactly everything that went into that day. And from that, we decided that sounded like a pretty good idea. So we contacted Ellis Henican, and Ellis had just written Sean Payton's book about the Super Bowl victory for the New Orleans Saints, and started talking to him about the project, and really hit it off with Ellis, and we began working together to tell this story. The interesting thing about that day is we were probably a quarter of a mile from it being one of the greatest races in the history of NASCAR. It had everything. It had intense action, tremendous three-wide racing, lots of lead changes, and then a upset winner at the very end made it just an amazing race. But unfortunately, coming off turn 4 for the last time that day, Dale crashed and he died, and it made that day the worst race in NASCAR history. And there I stood in victory lane as the winner of the worst race ever. So it was something that I just stored away. I didn't want to talk about it. I never watched one lap of the coverage of that day. After victory lane, I went into my motorhome and tried to build a shell around me just to not even go back to that day. And that's obviously not a healthy way to live your life, and it was important for me to tell the story. And after 9 years or so, I watched the race from Daytona, February '01, and remembered the action that we went through, and remember the plan we had, how Dale Jr. and we had talked about working together, or Dale and I had prior to the race starting, and just the tragic events of that day have been painful for me, but talking about it, telling the story, I think has been really healthy, but it still hadn't answered the question. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I believe everything happens for a reason, but darn, I don't think human beings are designed to go through what I went through in such a short period of time, having the biggest day of my life and the biggest win in my career, but then even a bigger loss off turn 4 with Dale.
Mike, well, real quick, can you kind of describe what that night was like with you? You won the 500, broke that embarrassing 462 race losing streak, and then Earnhardt died. Did you cry that night? Were you confused? Were you confused about how to feel? Was there any part of you that said, this is my moment, I'm being robbed of my moment? What was it like for you?
I think every emotion imaginable I experienced and tried to sort through. Obviously, the one that settled in and stayed there for a long while, and still, I deal with, but less now. I think I've processed it healthily now. But was guilt? I was there. I was a part of it. Why did it have to be like this? Was I responsible for it? Was I the reason why Dale was in that position? And I would ask myself that question, and I'd look around at people, and I'd wonder if they were thinking that. So I did think maybe a couple of times, why I won. Why couldn't this be a joyous day?
Mm-hmm.
But mainly, I just missed Dale and was trying to figure out how that could have happened and why it had to happen.
Michael, let me ask you this: the title of the book. All right, In the Blink of an Eye, Dale, Daytona, and the Day That Changed Everything. How did it change everything?
Well, racing is different today. It's safer. In a period of time leading up to Dale's death, we had lost 4 race car drivers within a year. And prior to that, others had died as well. So we went to the races knowing that there's a chance chance that somebody could get hurt. And I lived that way all through the 80s and 90s, all the way up to 2001. And today, because of the advancements in safety that were going on prior to Dale dying, it wasn't like one day NASCAR, the day after the 500, NASCAR woke up and said we got to work on safety. It was in process. You know, they were working with the safer barrier technology. Some guys were already wearing the Hans device, but it certainly made every competitor and everybody that was involved in the sport more sensitive and more with a more sense of urgency to get some things changed and done. And because of those events that led up to Dale's death and Dale's death itself, the cars are now much safer. You can bounce off more things and not get hurt. We have the safer barriers around the tracks. We have the Hans device. The car itself, we have a new car that just, you know, you can clobber stuff and all the energy and things that would hurt you in the past now don't hurt. So that made racing safer. Obviously, for years after Dale's death, the sport just grew and grew and grew. It continued to grow to where more the TV ratings were better. There were more fans in the stands, and so the racing not only was safer, but it was more entertaining for the fans, and so it just made it different than it was when I was coming up. We knew when the caution came out and somebody crashed at one of those tracks back then, you know, you held your breath a little bit, or you were at least concerned because you knew something bad could have just gone down.
Mike, you write a little bit also about Dale Jr. and how this, if Dale Sr. had not died that day at Daytona, how Dale Jr.'s career may have been different. That race team, DEI, would have stayed together and been successful. How do you think this changed how Dale Jr.'s career went?
Well, we obviously had some good runs through the early 2000s, and Dale Jr. won some big races and raced for a championship. And you know, I just think that I wanted to race forever for Dale. It was my dream job. It was the perfect place for me to be, and I love Dale Jr. and I love the way his dad lit up when he would talk about Junior. So you know, obviously Dale Jr.'s career has went really good through the 2000s, and he wound up at Hendrick Motorsports. But I know in my heart that if Dale had been at DEI, and Dale had been there to coach and direct Dale Jr. and I, we could have both had a lot more success. And our careers miss him, but mainly I know Dale misses his dad, and I miss my friends.
Michael, last one. Looking back at that night, what does it mean to you that you won your first Daytona 500 and that Dale Earnhardt was actually blocking to help you do that, and he died in the process?
Well, you know, we had a plan, and that plan was we would all work together. We would fight together in order to get to the checkered flag. And he was in a position that he believed was the best place for him to be. I think that on the last lap, I like to think that if he could have got the right run, you know, it was time to go racing. He was going to try to fight and get the win. That's why Crash was you know, the race was won when he wrecked, and Dale knew that. There wasn't any blocking that needed to happen anymore. Dale Jr. and I had separated ourselves from the three of those guys that were battling so hard behind us, and he was just simply racing to finish third. He knew in his brain that there wasn't any beating Dale Jr. and I at that point. So that's not specifically why he died. He was just a competitor. He was just trying to hold those guys off. But knowing that he was a part of a plan that put us in victory lane, it just makes me smile about how smart he was and how well he knew his sport and what he had been able to accomplish for his team that day.
He is Michael+Waltrip. The name of the book, In the Blink of an Eye, Dale, Daytona, and the Day That Changed Everything. Michael, great book. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. I hope you give it a good read.